Hello, greetings everyone, and welcome to Unpack This with your host, Gloria Bailey Ray, the Authentic Coach. Hey guys, today we're in season 4, episode 3, and today I'd like to talk with you about when crumbs become normal. That's right, when crumbs become normal. Have you ever looked around and realized that you've been sitting at a table for years and you're still hungry? Now, what am I talking about? You can be hungry for respect, reciprocity, recognition, support, opportunity, affection, peace, fair compensation, even. How about genuine friendship or emotional safety, right? Here's the thing. Sometimes we become so grateful for the invitation that we don't stop to look at what is actually being served. So today we're unpacking the tables that keep us at them, right? That it just keeps serving us crumbs, and why we continue to convince ourselves that crumbs are enough. You guys with me? As always, I'm dropping nuggets, so get your pad, your pen. Let me know where you are tuned in from. So I'm going to start with this. One of the most dangerous things about staying too long at a table that no longer serves you is that eventually the crumbs can start to feel normal, right? And when something becomes normal, we stop questioning it. We stop asking, should I be treated this way? And instead, we start saying things like, that's just how things are. That's just how this company operates. Hey, that's just my family, or that's just my friend, or that's just how marriage is, or that's just business. No, sometimes what you've come to normalize is actually what has been slowly diminishing you. There's a quote that says, what you allow is what will continue. Now, I want to be careful with that because sometimes I really do believe that we don't consciously choose mistreatment. Sometimes we're just simply trying to survive, keep the peace, hold the family together, protect the job, or give someone that we love a second chance. But honestly, there comes a point when we have to examine the pattern. Why do I say that? Because if you repeatedly accept being overlooked, eventually what's going to happen is you may start believing that being overlooked is just simply your place. Wow. So what does overlook or being overlooked look like, right? It may look like you being in a meeting where everybody else's ideas are acknowledged except yours. You may make a suggestion and nobody responds. And 10 minutes later, somebody else says the exact same thing, and suddenly everybody says, hey, that's a great idea. See, being overlooked can also happen in families. You're always that dependable one, the one who shows up, the one who helps and remembers the birthdays, checks on everybody else, brings the food, makes the call. But when something important happens in your life, suddenly everybody is busy. Can you guys relate to that? And you may tell yourself it's okay, but honestly, after a while, you need to ask yourself whether it really is okay. Then there is being the last consideration, that part. That can look like somebody making plans with everybody else first and then calling you when something falls through. It can even look like a partner consistently considering everybody else's needs before your own. And it definitely can happen professionally. You're qualified, you've done the work, you've demonstrated loyalty, and you have delivered. But when opportunities for leadership or visibility or promotions come up, somehow your name is always discussed after everybody else's. And honestly, this is a point where you have to stop asking, why don't they see me? And begin asking, why do I keep staying where that repeatedly shows me where I rank? I want to say this, crumbs aren't always nothing. That's why they're dangerous. They dropping or giving you just enough crumbs to keep you sitting there. And that, everyone, that's the conversation. Because if someone gave you absolutely nothing, walking away might be easier. But you know how it rolls, that intermittent attention or occasional praise or periodic affection, those promises, or you get those little bursts of support, that is what can keep people invested far, far longer than they should be. Then there's being contacted only when somebody needs something. I know some of you all know at least one person like that. They don't call just to say or ask, how are you? I recently had that situation. They call because they need a favor. They need money or advice or an introduction. They need you to fix something, or basically, they need your time or emotional support. And essentially, they need you to show up. And because you are so dependable, you do. But you got to ask yourself this, when you need something, can you make that same call? That is where the difference between being loved and being useful becomes very important. This quote that I love is, it says, pay attention to who claps when you win, not just who calls when they need you, right? And I say that because support is another area that sometimes we make excuses for. Being unsupported does not always mean someone is openly against you. Sometimes the absence of support is much quieter. You announce something important and they say nothing. You launch a business and there is complete silence. You publish a book, silence. You get promoted, silence. So you're going through something difficult, and suddenly the person who always has access to you, they cannot even seem to find the time. And let me say this, nobody is required to celebrate every single thing you do. But when someone consistently benefits from your support while withholding theirs, that deserves attention. See, support is supposed to have some level of reciprocity. I'm not saying perfect equality, but reciprocity. Then, then there is this piece about being underpaid. Let me shift to this. And this table can exist in a job or a business relationship, a consultant arrangement, or even with families. You are asked to give more. You work longer. You take on additional responsibilities. You help out. You're flexible that, hey, do us this favor. And sometimes you do it because you want to demonstrate commitment. But listen, commitment without boundaries can become exploitation too. You have to ask, am I being compensated appropriately for the value I am bringing? And compensation is not always money. Sometimes the compensation is opportunity, it's recognition, it's access, professional growth, respect. But if you keep pouring in more and receiving less, eventually you're going to have to do the math, because your generosity should not become somebody else's business model. Do I need to say that again? Your generosity should not become someone else's business model. Now, let me talk a little bit about disrespect. Disrespect is not always yelling, it can be subtle. It can be someone consistently interrupting you, dismissing your opinions, or making jokes at your own expense, or talking down to you, or even ignoring your boundaries. How about speaking to you in ways that they would never speak to someone else? Or just constantly saying something hurtful and then telling you that you are too sensitive when you respond. And when disrespect becomes familiar, we sometimes start managing our reactions instead of addressing the behaviors. We tell ourselves things like, don't make a big deal of it, just let it go. That's just their personality. I want to just tell you, sometimes peace does not come from learning to tolerate disrespect better. Sometimes peace comes from refusing to keep participating in it, right? Let that sit with you for a moment. Then there is emotional depletion. This one can be harder to recognize because there may be um, not one dramatic incident. What happens is you just notice that every time you leave that person, that environment or that meeting or job or a situation, you just feel drained. You feel heavy. You start replaying the conversation in your head. You even second guess what you said, or you wonder whether you did something wrong. And before you know it, you find yourself mentally preparing before every interaction because you already know that it's going to take something out of you. Y'all, that matters. Your body recognizes an unhealthy table before your mind is ready to admit it. So you gotta pay attention to what happens inside you. Do you feel tension every time their name come across your phone? Do you feel relief when plans get canceled? Or how about, do you feel like that you can finally exhale when you leave the room? Those reactions, those reactions, you guys, are information. That's why I believe journaling can be such an important part of self-awareness. See, because memories can be selective, especially when you love someone or when you want something to work, or even when you've invested years into a friendship or a marriage or maybe a career, even an organization or relationship. What happens is we remember the good days, the apologies, the promise, or the one time they showed up. And sometimes what happens is we forget the 20 times that they did not. And that's why journaling gives you something memory does not always give you. What am I talking about? A record. Gives you a record. Not a record so that you can keep score, not a record so that you can say angry, but a record so that you can see patterns. You get to write down what happened, how you felt, what was said, what you needed, and how you responded. You write down whether you communicated the issue, and then you come back to it later. 30 days later, 90 days later, 6 months later, and you ask yourself, has anything actually changed? And get this, you may discover that what you thought was an isolated incident has happened 5 different times. You may discover that every time you set a boundary, the same person withdrew affection. Or how about every time you received an opportunity, that same friend became distant? And that every 6 months, you're writing about the same exact problem at work. There's a pattern there. You may discover something about yourself. Maybe you repeatedly have avoided difficult conversations, or you've said yes when you really wanted to say no, And here's the piece that so many of us do. You ignore your own instincts because you are being afraid of being called difficult. Or, you know, you just keep accepting less because you're hoping that somebody will eventually recognize how much you bring to the table. Y'all, this is the other purpose of reflection journaling. See, you already know that the table isn't feeding you. You know that. You're just struggling with giving yourself permission to leave it. And it's not simply about identifying what other people are doing. It's also about you asking, what patterns have I participated in? Or what have I excused? What have I allowed to become normal? And most importantly, what am I willing to do differently now that I recognize it? Because, see, awareness without action simply becomes just another entry in your journal. So remember this: familiar does not always mean healthy. And a pattern is a message repeated until you're willing to hear it. So the next time you find yourself saying that's just how it is, you need to stop, write it down, look back. Ask yourself whether this is truly an isolated moment or whether you have been sitting at this same table, eating the same crumbs for years. I want you to know this. You don't have to stay at the table just because you were invited, right? Not at all. It's really important to recognize that these tables that you have been sitting at for a very, very long time, it's time to get up. It's time to move. And recognizing these different patterns, these crumbs, right? Um, it's important that you are able to explore what has been happening, what has been going on. Why am I continuing to do these things? That's the piece, right? That's what we need to recognize. And no matter how you encapsulate it, no matter how you continue to try to make some sense of it, I I just want you to understand that it is important, and especially as we mature, as we grow, you have got to understand that the crumbs that you are being fed, they are not the crumbs that will sustain you, will allow you to grow, will allow you to morph, right? That is so important. So I want to just drop this on you for a moment, that the idea of the table is something that you really want to explore and explore in deeper depth, is that you can explore deeply by looking into the book When to Get Up from the Table When Love is Not Being Served. And although the title speaks about love, the principle reaches that much further than romantic relationships, because the table is not just a friendship or a family or a career organization. Sometimes the table is just a version of yourself that you have simply outgrown. If this conversation has you examining one of your own tables, just remember that this book is available through Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, Ingram Sparks. And whether you buy the book or not, I need you to ask yourself the question, what have I are being served here? And why haven't I decided, or why have I decided that what I'm being served is enough, right? When in fact it really is not. That keeps it genuine, that keeps it real, and it really and truly gives um, what do I want to say? It pulls together three questions I'm going to ask you to challenge yourself. What table in my life is consistently leaving me hungry, right? And when I speak about hunger, you know, I just want you to go back to this. You could be hungry for respect, hungry for recognition or support, hungry for opportunity, affection, peace, fair compensation, genuine friendship, emotional safety. I ask you to ask yourself that that's the first question. What table in my life is consistently leaving me hungry? The second table is what am I receiving that keeps me sitting there? Now that in itself, it commands a deeper dive into why are you staying at tables that you feel that you know. Because feeling is one thing, but you also know it's not serving you, it's not fulfilling you. And then the third question is what is staying at this table costing me, right? And so many of us, we've been so used to just barreling through life, not really paying attention to what is what is staying put in this situation, what is it costing me? That is the question, right? And I'm just going to ask you to think about, is it costing you not being recognized? Is it costing you to just shrink yourself just to be accepted, right? Is it costing you to consistently apologize and keep repairing a relationship that you played really no part in, but you find yourself going over and over? Or how about the boundaries that you had set, and yet this person continues to punish you, right? How about just the fact that, you're valued just for what you do? Again, you already know that the table is not feeding you. You're just struggling with giving yourself permission to leave it, right? So if you're perfectly satisfied with what you're doing, then I say have at it, right? Then if you do an inward look at where you are, where you want to go, how you envision your life to be, then that's where we've got to start making some hard choices. I will say this, you don't have to stay at any table, family, friends, job, just friendships. You don't have to stay at any table just because you were invited. Remember that. I always say, never set yourself on fire just to keep somebody else warm. That's the ticket, ladies and gentlemen. That's the ticket. I want to thank you so much for being here with me today. I always like to end with asking you this. If this episode resonated with you at all, if you know someone who needs to get up from some tables or a table, right? Please share this episode with them. Like, share, follow. And I thank you all so much. Those of you who've been with me from season 1, and here we are in season 4. Thank you so much for your support, your love. I so appreciate all of you. So until this time, next week, I am Gloria Bailey Ray, the authentic coach, and you have been tuned in to Unpack This. Peace, love. Until next time, you guys, take care.